Every 40 seconds, someone in the world suffers a stroke, and in the next minute, they could lose 1.9 million brain cells. No warning, no pain, just a clot or a rupture cutting off life to the brain. First, you forget a word. Then, your hand won't move. Your mouth droops. Your voice disappears. You try to scream, but it's trapped inside a body that no longer listens. Stroke doesn't knock, it invades. And if you don't act within minutes, the person you were might never return. As a brain doctor, I've seen what stroke can steal: speech, movement, even the sense of self. If it strikes, what you know in the first minutes can mean everything. In this video, I'll take you deep inside the brain, explain how stroke attacks, and show you the warning signs that most people miss until it's too late. This knowledge could save your life or someone you love.
Chapter 1. The Inside Assault. How a brain stroke quietly attacks you from within. What happens during a stroke you can't feel until it's too late. Stroke doesn't knock, it strikes, quietly, devastatingly, without waiting for your permission or awareness. Every 45 seconds, someone's brain begins to die. And what truly happens inside the skull during a brain stroke is not just medical, it's warfare. Imagine a silent siege. Blood vessels are the highways of life, and in one cruel moment, the supply line is cut. Neurons cry out as oxygen vanishes, but no one hears them. That's the terrifying truth about what happens during a stroke. You don't always feel it until it's too late. This is where ischemic stroke makes its move, the most common form, caused by a clot that chokes the vessel, suffocating parts of your brain. Or worse, a hemorrhagic stroke, where a weakened artery bursts and blood, once your ally, floods the brain, crushing tissue as it spills. Sometimes it starts smaller, a TIA, a so-called mini-stroke. The symptoms come and go, often ignored. But let me ask you this. How would you know if the strange numbness in your arm or your sudden confusion last week was a TIA, a warning shot before the real attack? I've treated men who laughed off their symptoms only to wake up unable to speak, paralyzed on one side. One patient, Walter, collapsed while watching television. 10 minutes later, the left side of his brain was irreversibly damaged, and no one saw it coming. Stroke is not just a moment, it's a chain reaction. The brain doesn't explode, it fades, like a city losing power, block by block, until it goes dark. The only defense is knowledge. Recognizing the 3 types of stroke and understanding their silent tactics is the first shield. So let's begin there. If this chapter opened your eyes, comment 3 types below, not just for yourself, but for the ones you love. Because the most dangerous thing about a stroke is thinking it won't happen to you. In the next chapter, we'll expose the most deceptive of all, the TIA, a stroke that comes, whispers, and walks away until it returns with fury.
Chapter 2. The Silent Shot. TIA, the mini-stroke that disappears, but warns of a real stroke you might never survive. What if your stroke already happened and you missed it? That's not a scare tactic. It's a clinical reality I've witnessed far too many times. A TIA, or transient ischemic attack, is often called a mini-stroke. The name is misleading because what it really is a loaded gun that misfires once, then comes back to finish the job. One night, a man I treated, let's call him Robert, woke at 3:14 a.m. He looked confused, his mouth slightly drooped, his right hand sluggish. His wife asked, "Are you okay?" He nodded slowly, speech a bit garbled, but insisted he was fine. Within 15 minutes, the symptoms vanished. Everyone went back to sleep. 3 weeks later, at breakfast, Robert collapsed into his oatmeal, paralyzed and unable to speak. That morning wasn't the beginning, it was the ending. The true stroke had been quietly building, and it began the moment his family dismissed that first sign. You see, a TIA occurs when blood flow to part of the brain is temporarily blocked, just long enough to trigger real stroke symptoms like facial droop, weakness, or slurred speech. But then the blood moves again and everything seems normal. That's the trap. Patients think they got lucky, but medically, we consider a TIA the single clearest warning sign that a massive stroke is imminent, often within 90 days. I often ask patients, have you ever had strange symptoms that disappeared in minutes? If so, that may have been your warning shot, and the next one might not miss. The solution is not fear, but immediate evaluation, brain imaging, heart rhythm monitoring, carotid scans. Waiting is gambling, except the stakes are your brain. If you've ever seen these signs or felt them yourself and shrugged them off, I urge you, don't ignore your body's whispered warnings. Comment, "Warning," if this chapter made you remember a moment that felt strange but passed. You're not alone, and sharing your story might save another. In the next chapter, we'll dive into the true emergency, when the real stroke hits and every single second determines how much of your brain and your life you'll be able to keep.
Chapter 3. Time is Brain. Recognizing Stroke Signs in Seniors When Every Minute Counts. BEFAST Guide to Act Before It's Too Late. Every second you hesitate during a stroke, your brain loses roughly 32,000 cells. That's not a metaphor. It's a neurological fact I wish more people understood before it was too late. A stroke is not a sudden event. It's a slow erasure, happening cell by cell, thought by thought. And in those crucial first minutes, what you do or don't do can determine whether a loved one will ever speak again, walk again, or even recognize your face. Sarah was one of the lucky ones, not because of chance, but because of speed. One afternoon, she saw her father drop a glass of water. His right hand went limp. His smile looked crooked, and his words slurred. She didn't Google, she didn't wait, she dialed 911 within 3 minutes. Because of that call, her father received clot-busting medication within the golden window. 2 weeks later, he was walking, talking, and even laughing again. She didn't save him with knowledge. She saved him with action. This is why we teach the BEFAST method to recognize stroke signs early, especially in seniors. B for balance, sudden loss of coordination. E for eyes, blurred or double vision. F for face, uneven smile or facial drooping. A for arms, one arm drifts downward when raised. S for speech, slurred, confused, or no speech at all. T for time, because waiting even a few minutes can mean permanent loss. Most strokes happen in plain sight, but people miss them because they hope the signs will go away. Hope is not a plan. Delay is not neutral, it's destructive. The sooner you recognize these stroke symptoms, the higher the chance of survival and full recovery. So I ask you, would you know how to save someone if their brain started shutting down in front of you? If this chapter helped you see clearly, comment BEFAST below as your promise to remember. Tape it to your fridge. Teach it to your spouse, your children, your friends. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to build your shield long before the attack, because the best stroke is the one that never happens.
Chapter 4. The Defense Line. How to prevent a stroke before it strikes. Stroke prevention steps that could save your brain and your future. The best stroke is the one that never arrives, and avoiding it isn't about luck. It's about daily, deliberate choices. I've seen too many patients who believed strokes came from nowhere, like lightning. But more often than not, strokes are quietly constructed, habit by habit, day by day, until a vessel finally breaks or a clot finally lodges. Michael was 72 when I first met him. He loved red meat, whiskey, and long nights. He had high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and no intention of changing. Then one morning, after climbing one flight of stairs, he felt dizzy. Tests showed his carotid arteries were almost 80% blocked. "You're walking toward a stroke," I told him, and that moment became his turning point. He quit smoking, started walking after dinner, swapped processed food for plants, and began treating his body like a second chance. 10 years later, he still hasn't had a stroke. Instead, he's traveled, painted, and walked his granddaughter down the aisle. You see, stroke prevention isn't about perfection, it's about pattern. Controlling blood pressure, blood sugar, and cholesterol doesn't just reduce risk, it rewrites your future. Each cigarette skipped, each vegetable eaten, each morning walk, they don't just add years to your life, they protect the most delicate organ you have, your brain. High blood pressure silently weakens vessel walls. Diabetes inflames them. Smoking narrows them. But the same body that breaks down can also build defenses if you let it. I often ask patients, what if you could prevent 80% of strokes starting today? The answer is always, I wish I'd started sooner. Let this be that moment for you. Prevention is not passive, it's armor, and every small choice is a tile in your shield. If this chapter gave you a roadmap, comment SHIELD below and tell me what's one habit you'll change this week. In the next chapter, we'll face the harder road, what happens when the stroke has already struck and the fight becomes about rebuilding what's been lost.
Chapter 5. The Long Road Back. Stroke recovery after paralysis, speech loss, and setbacks. Can a broken life be rebuilt? Your brain may be injured, but your will remains untouched. And that's where healing begins. After a stroke, the world doesn't just look different, it feels unrecognizable. For Linda, the silence after her stroke was the loudest pain she ever knew. She couldn't speak, not even a whisper. Her family read old birthday cards aloud while she stared, eyes wet, fingers twitching. The first time her therapist placed a mirror in front of her, she didn't see herself. She saw a stranger trapped inside her own skin. But somewhere deep in her damaged brain, something still burned. After 8 weeks of speech therapy, she formed her first word, Mom. Her daughter fell to her knees crying. That sound wasn't just speech, it was defiance. And 2 years later, with trembling fingers and halting breath, Linda gave a toast at that same daughter's wedding. This is what real stroke recovery looks like. It's not instant, it's not pretty, but it is possible. Science calls it neuroplasticity, the brain's remarkable ability to rewire and adapt. But neuroplasticity needs a partner, your persistence. Every inch of recovery is earned, from gripping a pencil to standing unaided, from swallowing without choking to forming a full sentence. Some survivors walk again, others speak again. Some never do either, but find purpose in new ways. But the common thread? Not giving up. I often hear, can life ever be the same after stroke? No, it won't be the same, but it can still be rich, still be yours, still be worthy. If you're on this road or walking beside someone who is, don't focus on the finish line. Focus on today's inch, then tomorrow's. If this chapter gave you strength or helped you see a path forward, comment HOPE below. Someone reading it may be searching for that very word. In our closing chapter, we'll bring it all together and give you the tools to share, act, and become a light for someone still in the dark. You've come too far to stop now.
You've seen what a stroke does. You know the signs. That means you carry something powerful, awareness. Not everyone does, but you do, and that makes you someone who can save a life, maybe even today. Comment, share, if you'll send this to one person you care about. A single message can become a lifeline. And if you believe this knowledge matters, subscribe to this channel now. That one click helps us reach families before stroke ever does. It helps us reach yours. The next chapter won't be about the science. It won't be about symptoms. It will be about you, your life, your future, and what you can still protect, starting right now. Don't leave yet. What comes next may not just change your mind, it may change your story.